Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Ball with Pat Leonard. I am the New York Daily News' NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. Have a special guest on the podcast this week. Bleav founder and CEO Bron Heussenstamm here to talk all things sports, sports media, sports business. Happy to have him on the show, even though I'm a Notre Dame guy and he went to USC. First, want to remind you, please subscribe, rate, and review. So subscribe on YouTube at PL on NFL, on Instagram and TikTok, the same handle, Twitter, P Leonard NYDM. And please rate, comment, review these podcasts. If you like it, give a thumbs up on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe, please rate and review. That is the way we continue to grow this show that you guys are starting to consume and love more and more as it continues to reach more eyeballs across all these platforms that Bleav now has our shows streaming on, as well as on YouTube, as I said, where you can get my content from the Giants beat, from my NFL coverage with the Daily News, and from all my work with Bleav as a whole. First, want to tell you about our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get your latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's NBA Finals. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season. We have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use your promo code Bleav, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. And now on to our guest, Bron Heussenstamm, founder and CEO of Bleav. All right, we are back here on Talking Ball with Pat Leonard. Have a very, very special guest today, the founder and CEO of the Bleav Network, Bron Heussenstamm. A USC guy, though. And so, Bron, this is a little bit like Notre Dame, USC. You know, the Bush push was really my worst sports memory. I mean, let's be honest. I was halfway down the stands in Notre Dame Stadium charging the field with the clock on zero. So I'm really happy to have you here. But I see that the Trojans, and that's all I can think about.
Oh, man, Pat, you flipped that coin. That was one of my best sports moments. So apparently
funny.
we were both there. I was sitting on like the 5-yard line, right where Leinart fumbled on the play before. That was right in front of us. People went ape and went nuts. And watching you all crawl back to your seats after the Bush push was so good. How could you not love that? Pat, people love a story like that.
What a dark night in South Bend, Indiana that was. I will never forget on the play, Bron, the actual Bush push when Leinart spins and reaches the ball over his head. One of my friends lived in the same dorm, Brandon Hoyt, middle linebacker, 39. He looks like he could hit Leinart's back, keep him out of the end zone, but he sees the ball and he reaches for the ball as anybody would in that split second trying to make the play. And that, in my mind, ends up being the difference. But so funny that we are now here together. Very happy to have you on to talk not just football, which we talk a lot of here, but the business of sports, the business of sports media. Where are we? Where are we going? You got a BS from USC with an entrepreneurial emphasis. And of course, you found Bleav that now is covering across the country all these different sports, all these different teams uniquely like nobody else is. So my first question for you, really just right off the bat, is why did you find Bleav? And, you know, how did that come from just an idea that when you were approaching sports to now actually being this business?
Sure. And look, it's a great question. And I love businesses like this because it was really founded out of need. So I had an agency, you know, that's always kind of been my thing. My entrepreneur major, like you said, from USC, my college business plan. I got the top 10 award right behind me back there somewhere, was representing all of my surf friends. And that's something I did. 15 years later, you know, I'm looking for one of my clients to get into the podcasting. That was Ryan Leaf. And I'm saying, Ryan, you got to do this thing. Like there's a wave coming, Mark Moran and Joe Rogan at the time were kind of like the big leaders. And they were really showing that you could have a world-class radio show from your house. This is kind of even before video, about 5.5 years ago. And I just called around and I said, I wanted him to sign with a brand because that's what a manager wants to do. And because I Googled how to podcast and I didn't want to learn all that and have to help Ryan as you do in that situation because I didn't know what to do. And there just wasn't a place that was like a go-to specialist. Now, if you were a big star, sure. But for everybody else, and even some of the big stars, like, there's only 5 chairs, maybe, on a Fox morning. There's only 2 slots for former athletes on the radio in a local city. Like local radio is not step 1. Local radio is like step 6. Like, as as a host, like you got to grind to get those microphones. And so we really saw this as just a business that was, able to skip the middleman and go direct to consumer the same way clothing, which was a business I had before, had done through Instagram. People were now skipping Nordstrom's and going direct to consumer. You could do this same thing. And we put it out. And some of our other friends wanted on, and here we are 4.5 years later. We have 175 athletes on the platform, and we really answered that question. Where do you go if you want to get into this media business? You go to Bleav, and and then we combine them with fantastic hosts like yourself, and you've got a success.
This is probably a more complicated answer than just something straightforward and in and out. But how is it growing today? How is Bleav growing today compared to when you started it? Because obviously you said it went from this idea you had and this initial conversation with Ryan Leaf, and now you're up to this 175 hosts. You're covering nationwide. So how is it growing now? What are you focused on at the moment right now?
Yeah, it's been phenomenal to see. When I started this, I was driving microphones over to professional athletes' houses and showing them how to use Skype. I mean, that's where it was. Technology. We were buying stuff on Amazon and like, hey, you need a cord to plug into your phone to take a guest, do it in person.
Wow.
And the technology has just been wild. So the goal for these, the hard part of this is they start at 0. And everybody's got to understand that when you start a podcast, you start at 0. It doesn't matter if you're on a network or anywhere. If you start on NBC at 8 o'clock, you've got a 7:30 show and you've got an 8:30 show. So, you've got some spillover and they've got some data at what that should do. There's no data, it's just start and go. And so for us, it's always been about how to maximize that voice once it starts. So it doesn't take, 3-6 years because people can just grind out. And so we're so happy that, we've been able to grow to a level where we can break through these glass ceilings. I've got 2 24-hour television stations, Bleav and Bleav Football, that you're a part of. They just got picked up by Fubo this last week. That's phenomenal for us. That means when our athletes and our hosts talk, it's heard because there's nothing worse than getting onto a podcast, doing an hour and then checking your numbers like it's your dating routine and seeing like, man, I only got 7 listens. Like that's a bummer, and it takes time. But, this isn't TV and radio. This is Twitter. This is Instagram. This is YouTube. Like nobody tweeted and then was like, where's my Coca-Cola contract on this first tweet? It takes a little bit of time. And so for us to be able to circumvent that and put it in other places. We're on 40 platforms now, and 12 of those are podcast locations. So we've got 28 other spots that are we've built up to. We've got 3 tune-in radio stations. Like when you talk, for better or for worse, it's heard in those 40 spots, and we're not done yet. We want it everywhere. So that's the goal. And, thanks for asking about that. And, it only works with hosts like yourself. If you're not doing a fantastic job and saying great stuff, then we've got nothing. So it really is a partnership and something that we're really excited about.
That growth is great news. But like I said right at the beginning, so first of all, you're a former professional athlete, a former pro surfer, but then also with your entrepreneurial spirit and experience and your business acumen, we have you here to talk about not just the business of sports media, but also sports in general. You can go on a lot of different topics, and I wanted to take advantage of your knowledge to dive into some of the here and now, what's happening in sports right now. We'll get into a little bit of football. I'm going to start, though, with football across the pond. Lionel Messi, the World Cup champion, the best soccer player arguably ever, now signing with Inter Miami FC. And so I wanted to ask you, obviously this is bombshell. I was rushing to try to get tickets to this August game, Red Bulls, Inter Miami, and Bron. They're already $10,000 on the secondary market. My question for you is, can a signing like this galvanize Major League Soccer? And can soccer as a professional sport and business in the United States increase exponentially and grow and succeed and get in front of everybody finally because Messi has made this move?
Yes, to an extent. It's a step in the right direction. It's not the finish line for them.
Okay.
It's wonderful. The finish line for them is Messi at 25, not 35. That's where you've got to get to, right? And that's where the rest of the sports are. There are other leagues. And that's an interesting thing about soccer, which makes the salary cap so difficult, is there's a league in every country. And there's supplemental leagues too. Like, a lot of people in the US don't know that we have the USL, that sits, and there's 2 of those leagues, right? And now we've got MLS too, and we've got MLS. So getting back to Messi, this is fantastic. It sends shockwaves around the world that the MLS has a draw. And look, he's not rolling around out there in a wheelchair. Like, he just won the World Cup. He's got skill. And the difference between him and Beckham is Beckham was awesome, but Beckham was a midfielder. Like, Beckham wasn't necessarily a goal scorer, not a dribbler. Beckham's a passer, a beautiful, handsome soccer player that everybody loves. Like, Messi is going to dribble right around people. And that's, we love that. It's very entertaining. I mean, he might average a goal and a half a game, like, realistically. He comes in right here in shape, just coming off of starting for one of the best teams in Europe. So
Bron's setting the odds right now. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Like, he is sick. And he seems like a great dude on top of that. I don't know. His English isn't that great. He's from Argentina. He played in Spain most of the time. But a place like Miami suits him well. If you're going to be in the United States, you can get by on Spanish there, and I'm sure he'll learn. And like you said, the secondary markets here, it's not just about the MLS. I mean, this is Apple. This is Adidas. Who knows, what those salaries look like. If you're Apple and you put, 2 billion plus into the MLS, what's another 50 million, to secure that and bring Messi over here. So, it's all very exciting, those secondary markets, and it's a good step. Now, I don't think MLS will ever get there until they relinquish the salary cap. You really need the free market in there. So if you're not familiar with the way the salary cap works in MLS, they have 3 designated slots. So it's a salary cap, and then 3 players, you can just pay them whatever you want. And to me, you're not competing now if Saudi Arabia is offering 250 million for Karim Benzema to come play. Like, that's an outlier, right?
No doubt.
But you have to be able to compete on the open market for those good players. And what's happening is, it's not so much like, bringing Messi over, it's losing the young Americans to Europe. That's where MLS really has to shore that up. And they have to be able to sign them to the going rate. If they're getting 4 and 5X to go play in Europe at 18, 19, 20, then you're going to have to supplement those players with players that aren't them. And so that's, I think, the biggest step for MLS is, can they keep those homegrown players here? Because you're just going to raise the floor of the talent at the league. And right now, I think the league sits somewhere around 10 or 11 as far as talent driven. And Americans like number 1. The country code is number 1. We like to stick our chest out until it gets closer to that number 1 slot. It's always going to be kind of secondary in this market. But yes, this is a great step in the right direction.
That's very well said about losing Americans elsewhere and really having to flip that script. I'll be very interested to see, because there's rumors that Messi's contract includes, option to own part of the team, to receive royalties on new subscribers that Apple receives based on his signing. And, he's probably a unicorn, and players probably don't after him get those same types of things in contracts, but you see it everywhere. Once one player kind of unlocks the door to something, whether it's a guaranteed contract or a sport or whatever, I do wonder if that kind of bleeds into not just soccer, but, kind of sports in general, as guys start to think bigger. But a sport that has no trouble growing in this country, the other football, the NFL, one of the newest developments in the league, and something a lot of people have been talking about, Bron, really all spring, where there is really no offseason, is the Thursday night football rule and the expansion of it. So, of course, they have now added up to two Thursday night games for each team instead of one on a Thursday night. So the league can schedule teams for 2 Thursday games each year. And the even more controversial decision, the ability to flex games in and out of Thursday night football from weeks 13 to 17 this year. They say that's on a 1-year trial basis. But Bron, I want to know, as a former pro athlete yourself, and then as a consumer, and also in the business of bringing the information of the NFL to life and to people around the country, what do you think of this constant expansion and kind of pushing of the line of not just the televising of these games on these unusual nights, but also the flexibility and the ability for the league to push through something that it got a lot of pushback on from coaches, players, and people around the league?
It is a great loaded question because there's so many sides to this, right? You've got the economic side killing it. How can you turn that down? It's $1 billion. But then it goes right into the player side, which is why do they want to flex the games? Because the games are terrible. Just say it out loud. They're bad. The home team has such an advantage. I mean, as a professional athlete, you get into a routine. Your routine is everything. You spend your entire career. Mondays, you're watching film. Tuesdays, you got the day off. Wednesdays, you implement the new schedule. Thursdays, you go into it. Fridays, you go into it. Saturdays, either travel or walk through. And then all of a sudden, you're coming off a Sunday night game. How many times have you run into a wall 50 times and just felt great? Yeah, these people, they're professional athletes, but it still hurts. Like it still hurts.
No doubt.
So now you're talking about Monday. Forget reviewing the film. You're straight into a Thursday night game. Tuesday, do you even want to take that off? And then Wednesday, you can't even implement it because you're on a flight. So like it's going to be worse. I wouldn't be surprised if you see teams start resting players on that double Thursday night. If you're in like a 2-10 situation and you've got like a stud Breece Hall running back, like do you need him on a cold night running around out there when you could get a crack at some of your backups? And that is exactly what happened in the NBA, and they had to pull back. So it'll be really interesting to see this work. Flip it over to the economics. It's thriving. You can't turn down Amazon in that. That's just part of the culture. And by the way, players get paid for it. You're getting $45 million to go out there on a Thursday night. You're going out there on a Thursday night. You're excited about it. The players know what they signed up for. But at the same time, I'm really surprised they didn't go after Friday night. I know Friday night's taboo because of high school football.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's coming, and it's going to come quick. And I would have gone after Friday in the first place. That is a huge extra 24 hours. And Thursday, you're going to see either the USFL or the XFL slot in that spot. That is where I see it going in the future because it just makes too much sense to have a minor leagues that has its own night or potentially even like a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
Wow, load management in the NFL. That's a great point by you there. If it ever came to that, what an enormous story that would be. As you said, it's become a commonplace complaint in the NBA and pushback from teams and players there. That's a fascinating point. And so wait, when you mentioned Friday, I didn't think of this angle because of course we have Amazon and this new Black Friday game.
Watch the ratings,
right?
Watch those ratings. They are going to be nuts. Everyone is going to love it. And, we're going to do 2 or 3 next year. And then, we're going to do a permanent game on Friday night. It's coming. There's too much money. There's too much money. We're always going to take the path of least resistance. And we're always going to take the path of the most resources. And you put the two of those together and you've got Friday football.
Fascinating. That's something I will look for now. It's a great angle. So one angle of this, though, as well, is the fans. And like you said, you watch the numbers. If it's making money and people are watching and the league is growing, of course, people are loving your product. However, when you flex these games, you're screwing with the fans who are going to the stadiums. And yet Jerry Jones, the Dallas Cowboys owner, says out loud for everybody to hear, well, we know that's a problem, but he essentially says, a lot of our fans never go to the stadiums. They watch at home. And so
Sure.
He's saying the quiet part out loud, which is, well, we're prioritizing the people who are watching at home because there's more money in our media rights deals there. That leads me to this question for you. Could there ever be a day where there aren't fans in the stands for these games, where the owners and the teams are making so much money and then the product at home is becoming so good that either the fans that attend and feel like it's worth the money to spend tickets to even go to the game, it's either a limited amount or it ends up, becoming kind of like a moot point. Why should I go to the game? And why should the owners market to me and try to get me to pay for PSLs and ticket prices when they're making money hand over fist anyway?
It's a great question. Sports is dominating the live market. Even when you're watching 5 minutes behind, you're not looking at your phone. You don't want the text from your friends.
That's right.
And this is all a business at the end of the day. It thrives on marketing dollars. Marketers always need to get their product found. You start a product, people got to find it. Sports is a fantastic way to get your product in front of people. I see in the future the stadium's moving around. Like, why can't we play an NBA game at the beach? Laguna Beach has a famous court right on the sand. An NBA game there would be fantastic. You could put 2,000 people there. We always need new. There's always going to be competition to do better. We already did the bubble. You've seen what it looks like. We did baseball. It definitely drops. There's an energy. There's a walking out into the Coliseum. Are you not entertained factor? Like, if you want to get up, walk out in front of 55,000 people. Like, I always used to mess with my friends, even going back to college, and say, just because there's 60,000 people at your game and 50 people at my surfing contest doesn't mean I'm not excited to show up for those 50 people the same way you are for the 60,000 at your game. Like, you're always going to want that energy. But absolutely, I remember one of my buddies about 10 years ago was a minority investor in one of the teams. And he said at that time, they were worried about virtual reality, killing the consumer market. But they didn't realize how high those media rights deals were going to be. So if the media right, it might have started at 25% of revenue. If it gets to 75, 85, 100%, then, you're no longer going to need that revenue in stadium. And, I think that's something with baseball a little bit is, you've got 162 games, so it thrives on television. It's every night, 5 hours pre-post. It's so significant there. If you were to take a place like, say, one of the lower Pittsburgh, Tampa, it still can work, even if you're not getting all those people in the door. So it's always a possibility. And I see more movement on those. You see it going on in the NFL right now over to Europe. You're going to see this in every sport.
Right.
Baseball's starting to do it. They'll figure it out. They'll move it around. Travel gets easier. The tech gets easier. The setup gets easier. It gets less expensive. I mean, we're doing this right now on a laptop. This is a world-class television show shot at your house and mine. And so you're going to see that same thing come to football as well. And all sports.
No, great point. We're going to continue to see it evolve. It always seems to happen quicker than most people even expect it to. Curious to see what's going to be next. But meanwhile, while the NFL is making money hand over fist, and as you said, the players, their salaries are going up as well. Here in the New York area, there's a lot of conversation about the position in the NFL where the player often touches the ball the most, but is not seeing his salary go up. And that is running back. Of course, Saquon Barkley has not signed his franchise tag with the Giants. He wants a long-term deal, but you look around the NFL, running backs all over are struggling to get deals. They're signing franchise tags. Austin Eckler was going to hold out, then decided not to, got a couple incentives added. As we speak, Dalvin Cook is either being traded or released from the Minnesota Vikings. My question for you is, can all of these great players reverse a trend like that, where it's kind of quarterbacks are going up, defensive tackles are going up, offensive tackles, and yet the running back market is suppressed due to the current nature of the game? Is there any way these players can reverse that trend? Do you envision something changing in that regard? And what is your view just on a market development like that as a whole?
You're always going to have the invisible hand in a free market, and it's going to dictate those terms. If somebody is willing to play for less and they can do an equal job, then that scale is going to drop. Now, that being said, there was a quote circling around the NFL draft this year, which is something as a sports nerd I really haven't heard before. And that was talking about positional value in the draft. Get the fuck out of here with that shit. Like, you made it up because it's draft day. You can't be wrong on draft day. Everyone's right on draft day. And by the way, by the time you figure out 3 and 4 years later, no one remembers. You've already done 3 or 4 drafts and made your point. There was somebody who said, I don't care if Bijan Robinson goes in the Hall of Fame. You can't get out. Dude, you don't even know what you're talking about. Like, get your clicks some other way. Like, you give the running back the ball 15 to 25 times, and you're going to tell me that a cornerback can make more of a decision on a game? Now, I didn't play football. I could be totally wrong there, but you see what Derrick Henry does. You see what Saquon Barkley does. Like, if you've got the ball in your hands and you can score touchdowns, that's the most important thing in sports. Score, because that's who wins the game. And these are scorers. But at the same time, if you have a glut of them, then it'll come down. Now, if all of a sudden the training ground in college is great for quarterbacks, and in the first time in history, there's not only 8 people in the world that can play quarterback at any given time, if all of a sudden there's 55, those scales are going to come way down. And it's just the way it's going to be. Now, right now, you've seen a lot of those athletes move positions, right? Because wide receiver and quarterback just gets paid more. Cornerback gets paid more like than running back. So if you're a kid and you're well on your way, you might be moved in high school by either a coach, a parent, or yourself to say like, hey, I don't want to play running back. I'm playing wide receiver. They make twice as much. So that can come down. What does that do? Now, all of a sudden, there's less running backs. Now, all of a sudden, it's harder to find. And now, all of a sudden, the price goes back up. So it'll take care of itself. But yeah, the positional value, I mean, that's why people love football. It is the ultimate team sport. The left guard slips, the whole play is ruined. Everybody's got to do their thing. And so that's really what I think you'll see is it'll fluctuate until it finds its spot always.
No, you make a great point, which is context matters, and positional value often becomes a conversation where the context of the pick or the player or whatever is ignored. Great example is like the Patriots drafted Sony Michel in the first round, and as a rookie, he's their lead running back on a Super Bowl team. Saquon gets drafted in the first round. His team's not very good for several years. Why? Well, the team they joined was better, right? So their draft selection, obviously Saquon was drafted higher, but it's more about the total package, the total picture. What are you looking at, and not just the individual? I think you made a great point there. Expanding it back out to the NFL and then the leagues as a whole. As a huge sports fan across the board, and as we've talked about this evolution of the sports and sports media and business landscape, I am just fascinated by the differences in how these different leagues are received and how they sell themselves and how they market themselves and how people kind of take in that content and respond to it. And so as somebody who is a leader in this business and someone who understands and sees the full picture, I'm curious, which professional league do you think sells and markets itself best?
The NFL is the top 10 marketers of themselves, and baseball should just follow it. And baseball's on the absolute end of the other side. I mean, you go anywhere in the country and baseball players can walk down the street and completely unknown. They do nothing with their name. We as a company love baseball. It's got passionate fans. I'm Dodgers diehard. I was there the other night against the Yankees. It's the best. What are you doing? You got to figure it out there. But the NFL, it's so exciting. It's so fast. It's fun to go outside and throw a football back and forth. The players, whether or not you know them or not, it's like, wow, you played in the NFL. The head coaches are like leaders of men. It's arguably the best job in the United States from a cool perspective. It's like, dang, head football coach. Yeah. That is awesome. Nobody hates that. So I would say the NFL by far, and then, everything in between. I think basketball does a good job. I think the secondary market in basketball does a very good job. The companies do a very good job. Social media does a very good job in with NBA and basketball. And you see that rising. If I was going to buy stock in sports, you hold on NFL, you buy in basketball and you sell in the MLB just based on the marketing and the numbers.
Yeah, I asked this question in part because it was motivated in part by, I look at how the NBA every year, as much as I love watching basketball and the sport, I look at how the second the season ends, the NBA gets more interesting and starts dominating headlines, and their offseason always feels like not just as big or bigger, but it feels like they have headlines and bombshells, and they just keep your attention almost to the point where we're then training camp and the games start. You think, oh, okay, now we're going to actually watch the sport. But then I watch the NFL where the games kill and everybody watches and the money rolls in, and the offseason, there's still a lot to it, but you can see the NFL trying to push more content out in the May and June timeframe where, the NBA is killing and the NFL is trying to enter that space. And so I'm fascinated by kind of how differently received and how differently those things develop. And then I'm also just curious from a revenue standpoint, like is the NBA killing revenue wise because it has bombshell offseason stories, or is the NFL still going to dominate because its actual product in season is just that good?
Yeah, that's really a good question. And you're looking at it from, several angles as you have to from a business plan. Like With baseball, something that really holds them back is the structure of the salaries of rookies. So it is more beneficial for the baseball teams to sit on their rookies. Like, how stupid is that? Like, let's put this in play in the NFL. You roll out Kyle Pitts and you're like, hey, we're not going to start you till game 6 because it puts another year on your salary. Like, people would lose their mind. And that's what baseball does every year. And depending on the team, like, A's are bringing up anybody. Like, you don't necessarily want to play for the A's, but you want to be drafted by them because that's your fastest route up. You get drafted by the Dodgers, you're batting 330 at 26 in AAA, just like, hey, and all of their big talent. Now, they've done a little bit better job in the last year or two. If you play one game, it should be a clock. It's the easiest way to take it out. One game the whole year, that counts as a season. That way, everybody brings it up. You sell tickets against that rookie. Like, that's something that can make a real difference there when it comes to the marketing of the league. Now, you look at some of the other spots, and it's like, okay, basketball thrives on social media. I mean, it's number one there. Every crossover is exciting. Dunks are exciting. The players are involved. They answer, they talk. I think you've seen a little bit of that spill into football. Baseball has like a taboo against that. It's like unheard of. You can't celebrate. If you start getting really active on there, you're a cancer. People want to know like why you're doing that. Can you have a podcast? Also, the baseball players are busy. People don't realize like they're at the stadium from 12 to 12. It doesn't matter if you live in Detroit or Los Angeles. You live at the stadium. So they don't have a lot of time to do a lot of the other extracurricular activities that you could do in the NBA and the NFL. The NFL lends itself great. You got a week, you can sit down and do something. I mean, Draymond Green himself is really, coming around to this, that like your words are very valuable. Like, depending on who you are you playing? What city are you playing in? Did you used to play? Are you playing currently? Look at the secondary market for media in sports. I mean, it's made, dozens and dozens of billion-dollar industries. And Draymond is basically saying, I'm tired of giving away all this money out of my mouth. I'm going to say my stuff and get paid for it the way I want to get paid for it. And he's brilliant for it. And people are mocking it. Yeah, it's there in 10 years. It's going to be sitting in a hologram in your living room, and Draymond's going to be talking to you, and answering questions. And he's really a groundbreaker there. And I think it's just, as hilarious as it is, like JJ Redick really broke the ground on this. Like, he had the #1 sports podcast by himself because he was talking about things that people weren't, like, oh man, when you came off that screen and you didn't shoot it, like that was so disappointing. Like, that's the way, like, you're at the park. And that's the way he talked about it on his podcast. And he was phenomenal for that. So you're only going to see more media and more hype coming from the players themselves, especially as technology grows and just makes it easier and easier for them to do that.
You actually led me right into my next question, which was, which pro athletes do you think are doing the best job of harnessing a new sports brand, their own sports business, and what is it that makes them the best? And it sounds like you obviously have a lot of respect for Draymond and JJ Redick, and I couldn't agree with you more, especially on Draymond, from the sense of how candid he is when he speaks. It's not just that he's speaking, it's that he is not holding anything back. But I was curious who else you think has done a great job there.
Sure. Draymond, love him or hate him, you're listening, right? That's the Howard Stern model. If you're not saying something, you're saying nothing, essentially. And the interesting part about it is, like, these are pro athletes. They are wildly competitive. And it doesn't take the best athlete. Like, look at Pat McAfee. People don't even know that he was a punter. Like, did he even play? You survey people, they might not even know he played. So
right.
You have to grind. No one is just getting on a microphone and winning, right? You have to take it seriously. And some people understand that and some don't, because it is, again, you go back to the economic curve and the invisible hand, somebody else is grinding if you're not. And that was like the Kobe mentality. It's like, love the work, because if you're not putting it in, somebody else is. And it's the same thing in the media space. If you're not putting in the work, if you're not doing it 2 or 3 times, if you're not backing it up on your socials, if you don't have a team around you, somebody else is, and the eyeballs are going to go there. So there's people that have done it really well. But you've really got to want it. It's not going to find you. You have to find your audience. I think Damian Lillard, when he gets on, says things, he's very contrite and honest. And I think people really enjoy that. And there's other players that we've got, like I said, 175. And some of the things that they're talking about are just so refreshing and unique because they're doing it on their own terms and their own safe space. If you say something you don't like right here, we can go back and edit it, And if you're live, you can have some fun with it, but you're never getting like blindsided on your own show. So why would you sit in front of the media and let them, razz you when you can just take it home yourself? So it's only going to see more and more. But yeah, Draymond and JJ for me, really those groundbreakers, and Shaq too. He's kind of the OG, always has his fingers in everything. But you really have to earn your audience here the same way you earn your spot on a team.
And at Bleav specifically, obviously a huge part of your initial idea and the company as a whole now is, as you said, getting these pro athletes to tell their story on their own terms. And I was just wondering, just as examples, like what do in the NFL space where I am working daily, what do guys like, Ike Taylor, Jason Campbell, Carl Banks, Cordell Stewart, Lorenzo Neal, what do you see when you see the feedback and the reaction to the stories they're telling and what they're bringing on the microphone? How different is the response and how much more valuable is their insight than just the standard podcaster?
Sure. It's a great question. Look, the athlete's going to see the game in a way that we never will. They breathe it. They've seen every detail. They know the players. Athletes bring insight and access that only an athlete can. Now, you can understand the game just as well. You'll just never see it the way that they do because they were actually running around out there. And, that's kind of a funny part about this when we started is like, being a professional surfer, like my friends text me about a surfboard and try to tell me it's good. And I'm like, shut up. It's not good. Like, I will tell you if it's good or not. Like, I'm the pro. And then I text my friends in the middle of like a USC game that played there. And I'm like, what is that play call? And they're like, shut up. It was a good play call. Like, I'm the pro. Listen to me. So like you can get an expert level, but you'll never see it the way that they do. And again, their words have value. Like your words have value, your thoughts. People want to come and say like, hey, I'm watching the game and I'm wondering if you have the same opinion. Am I right? Am I wrong? Sports is such a passionate fan base. We are bred as group animals. Like this is what our do. This is our tribe. These are our colors. Like this is in your DNA and people love it. And they want to hear that insight from people that were there. And it's a perfect match.
Absolutely. So a game changer, another game changer in the sports space, obviously, it's already here, is the legalized gambling element. Of course, we're sponsored here, Bet Online, proud to be. And you can already see changes that are happening as far as, it's being marketed every time you're watching a game now. All the leagues are pushing it. Official sponsors, it's no running or hiding anymore. You can basically bet on everything and anything. My question for you is, where does it go from here, though? Because obviously gambling now has become a part of professional sports out in the open like never before. But what impact do you think that has, if any, or change it creates in the future, being now such a public part of professional sports?
Yeah, it's going to be a big part of it. And it's only going to grow because you're following the money. Again, there's so much money there. And this was one of the biggest lies that everybody would tell themselves. Everybody's already gambling. Like if you're in a fantasy league giving your buddy $100, you're gambling. If you're in an office pool collecting $20 for the NCAA tournament, you're gambling. So like everybody's already gambling. Even if you don't like to gamble, you're gambling. It's fun. It's fun and it makes money on the backside because let me tell you this, you are terrible at gambling. And you are a sucker for those lines and they love it and they want more of it. So you're only going to see state to state go because it's just, you're seeing the numbers. It's like marijuana. It's like everybody's already smoking, like tax it, make money on it, make it safe. Like Colorado limit. And they're like, they made a what? Yes. Bring that to my state too. So it'll always go. Now, could it get to the point where it's the technology is so good that you're like ball strike, could it get to the point where your fumble, at 20% odds, on this next play, it'll be very hard if it ever gets there to tell if anyone's cheating because very easy to throw one ball, and count that out. So, I think that there'll be always some parameters in play. I heard a great stat. There's 1.5 million shots on the PGA Tour, and you could potentially bet on all of them. Baseball and golf have so many stats that you could just run through the computer and say, 7% chance he hits it in the bunker. What do you want to bet on that? So, 17-1. And, I think he's going to hit it in the bunker, hit it in the bunker, And so that's something I think that it can get to, but you'll always have that like fair play angle, and that's something that we still haven't quite figured out, is where does it stop internally in the game? And I think that's where it will. But as far as
Mm.
coming state to state, and the next thing is really to make it easy on your phone. And then additionally, besides just like betting on the line, like it's hard to bet. There's a lot of things that people really don't understand. I think you're going to get a lot easier. I think you're going to get a lot more like Tinder of betting. You're going to swipe right on this one, swipe left on this one, over, under, real easy, click, 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 because it just makes it easier to spend your money and they want your money.
Right. No doubt. We started this interview talking about your founding of Bleav and also where it's growing today, the Fubo deal recently coming together. And, from the inside of this business, I wanted to know where you think the sports content and streaming is going next. What is the next big thing? We've seen, of course, all of these major networks start to try and harness and protect their investments and get it mobile, get it to people's phones, get it to people's iPads, wherever. We see the AI, this new Apple technology, basically, where you have this enormous mask on on your face,
Who
and you're
knows on
watching
that, right?
television, and you can see the rest of the room. I just wanted to know, where's it going next? Like, what in 10 years? What am I going to be sitting here talking to you about, saying, I can't believe I didn't see it, but you told me that back in 2023.
Well, it certainly doesn't seem like it's going into the metaverse. So we can wait. We can wait on having a digital avatar of ourselves and just enjoy the games for a couple more years. It's always going to be technology driven. I mean, those glasses are, 3,000 plus. If they're $80 and they can do that same thing, I've always thought augmented reality was the future, because people want to be here, right? It's not real if you're in that sector. It's you, but it's not real. You're always going to be real. And
Yeah.
if you can take what Pokemon did and put it on your face and not have it look ridiculous, I mean, that was the thing with like the snap glasses or some of the other stuff. Like, even when you see people playing virtual reality now, like the market is dictated, they don't like it. If they did, everybody would do it. They don't. No one wants to wear those headphones and spin around in circles in the living room. So it's like, what's next? Okay, let's do augmented. How good is that? If I could sit in my room without the goggles on and have 6 TVs running all virtually and have a player stand up and have in those different angles, I mean, that's coming. That's coming, and that's where it'll go. As far as like the media side, I think you're going to get more creators, more individual. But what happens when you're seeing in the streaming is you have to make money. That's the thing about all of this stuff, right? You can't have businesses that just build up huge amount of numbers and then get invested and then sell. Eventually it'll pop. And you've seen that the last couple of years. These things are popping. So it have to make money. So everything will go to individual and then it'll come right back together, because there's always good economies of scale in the back end. And you're seeing that with the streaming apps now. It was a huge race to get everybody's up there. And then you look at their books and they're losing $1 billion a quarter. And you're like, that's not sustainable. You can do that for, 8, 10, 12 quarters. You can't do that forever. And eventually it'll pop. So, people like yourself can have wildly successful own streams and be in the market, but eventually you'll need to be back in a spot that makes money and makes it worth your time. The supply and demand will win. So the technology is really going to drive it, and the ability to have businesses that actually make money. And you'll see the two of those collide to whatever it is. But look, in this industry, it's something new every day. Like the original business plan I wrote, there was no such thing as a fast channel. So how could I even put it in there that we were going to be on fast channels? Like, we never thought there'd be something like StreamYard. When you did this, it was on Skype and you had, the Amazon cords plugged into your phone so you could have somebody call in. Like, you never know what's going to come tomorrow. I mean, those goggles came out of nowhere. So it's all really exciting. But the two principles will always be that it's got to make money and it's got to work.
Well said. Fascinating perspective. Credit to you for building such a fascinating and network at Bleav that continues to grow and inform fan bases around the nation here in the U.S., covering every team, all these pro athletes with their perspectives that you can't get anywhere else. I know Saquon Barkley, Bron, is going to appreciate your perspective on running backs and positional value.
Good.
And we really just can't thank you enough. We know you're very busy, for stopping by here at Talking Ball and spending the time. So thank you so much.
Sure, Pat. It's a pleasure to be on, and I love Talking Ball. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good. That was a great conversation with Bron. Like I said, please rate, review, and subscribe on YouTube, on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. These subscriptions, these likes, these comments, all the engagement and all the support helps us continue to grow a podcast that we have big plans for in year 2. Can't believe we're there already in the 2023 NFL season. Before we get out of here, I want to tell you about another one of our sponsors, Estate 98. Hola, amigos. This is Pat Leonard from the New York Daily News. And if you're a coffee lover like me, you're going to love Estate 98, this ultra concentrated coffee from El Salvador, which dates back to 1798, is the most convenient premium cafe I've ever had. It takes me 3 seconds to make an iced coffee, which is perfect for my busy podcasting schedule with Talking Ball. I can take it with me on the go, make it anywhere. And with its rich smell and notes of milk chocolate and tangerine, this Essencia de Cafe has replaced my old coffee runs. Go to Estate 98 Coffee on Instagram, order and enjoy. Salud. Thanks for joining us this week on Talking Ball. We will see you next time.